Alright, there we go. Hey guys, what's up? I'm Rested here, and as you can see, I've got the green screen behind me, and I'm not using it for this video because it's actually up for Osiroshi, which is halfway through filming its first episode. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. I'll talk about it later. Um, let's move into our subject for today, and that is dealing with the fact that recently I've seen a ton of hate towards Eastern game developers on a kind of a shocking level. Um, Kind of making me wonder, like, where is all this hate coming from and why is there so much. I don't know if I want to call it racism or bigotry or just rage against Eastern developers recently. I saw it really begin to start back when Stellar Blade was being released. If you don't know anything about these games, don't really worry about that too much. I'm not getting into the plot or the story very much. I'm just going to talk about how it seems like there is a target on Eastern game developers by gaming journalists, especially, who seem to have it out for them, and I'm unsure why. I'm unsure why a lot of Asians right now are being attacked by these game journalists in an almost consistent racist, bigoted way, where they do little to no research around the culture of the country these different Eastern areas are from and the connection sometimes they have to the game, or that they just completely disrespect that and rip anything they want from those games or assume things about those games. So, like I said, the first time I saw this happen was with Stellar Blade. If you don't know it, it's like a Dark Souls type of game where you have to learn to fight a certain way, and timing has to be absolutely paramount when it comes to battling the bosses. Um, the main heroine is a female that has a lot of the aesthetics that Koreans find attractive. And because they designed this character in that way, um, IGN, one of these gaming journalists, especially the one from France, the French division, wrote an entire article tearing apart the CEO of the company that made Stellar Blade and the devs and graphic designers, all of them, for their creation of this character. So they said things like, these guys are obviously incels, they've obviously never dated a woman in their life, um, they're just creating the woman of their dreams in this game because they could never ever even talk to a woman in real life. And of course, the whole team was kind of like, whoa, where are you getting all this from, just from us designing an attractive heroine for the game? And the funny thing is it came back later, people did a little bit of research, and the CEO himself, the main person that they said, this is a person who's probably never met a woman in his life, is married to a model in South Korea. Um, and all the devs are married as well. They have their own families and wives. They live normal lives, none of which are incels or forever alone hikikomori. And, obviously they took offense. They're like, how could you assume all this stuff about us simply from a character we made for a game? And it got so bad, in fact, and even other countries started to call it out, being like, why are you being like this offensive to a company that simply made an attractive character for a game, that IGN had to take down the article. You can't even find it now, but there is the apology still up because they had to put that up. It says, recently IGN France produced and published a preview of Stellar Blade containing an offensive passage that should never have been kept. The text has now been edited, and this is our official apology to the Shift Up Corporation studio staff. That's the people that made the game. Also, please note that IGN France is an independent branch of IGN and that IGN's editorial staff had nothing to do with this incident. The original text of Stellar Blade preview contained comments that were out of place for us. While it was never our intention to disrespect Shift Up or any of its employees or their work, we recognize that the phrase taken in its literal sense, was inappropriate, and we regret it. It was taken in it, if you took it in its literal sense, well, I mean, it was like pretty direct. It was just like, this game looks like it was made by a bunch of incels who've never met a woman in their life. Was there another way to take that? Like, oh, haha, good joke. Like, I don't understand. And this is just like the beginning of the hate that I've seen towards anybody in the East as far as either game developers or game journalists are concerned. So let's take a look at another game developer. This one, obviously, not in Asia. This is Ubisoft, which is also France. I'm starting to wonder what's going on with France. Is there like a lot of hate for the East in France? Because Ubisoft is also a French developer, not a French game journalist, a French game developer. You probably have already heard all this BS about Assassin's Creed, the new one that's set in Japan, where they've decided to rewrite history and make Yasuke, a black man who came over to Japan, as a main samurai character you can play. They didn't choose an actual samurai from that time, even though one of the most famous, Nobunaga, was definitely a good choice if you wanted to make a historical samurai. And Yasuke himself was never a samurai. Now, we can get past that issue right away. I get it. You're trying to make a fantasy version of history, although they do have people on their team who say this is all factual, that Yasuke really was a samurai, while actual Japanese scholars of history have written back to them multiple times saying, no, there's no record whatsoever of this having happened. But, do you, Ubisoft? Another big problem that they're having now is there is I guess what you would call like a war enactment team. Kind of like, imagine in America we have like Civil War reenactments. People dress up in the old uniforms. They go out there with guns that just have blanks in them and stuff like this and reenact these battles that happen. So there's a group like that in Japan too. They reenact the old shogunate fights and stuff like that. And they have like a family crest for them, or a clan crest, if you will. And they have also a clan flag, all right? And when I say clan, I mean like really old samurai clans, okay? There's no racism involved in these. These were Japanese armies fighting Japanese armies in Japan on Japanese land. Pretty much just fighting over like prefectures and stuff like that a long, long, long time ago. For example, this group that they decided to steal some stuff from were the musketeers for that clan's group. Not the French version of musketeers with like the big bushy mustache and awesome hats and stuff like that. We're talking about like very old style samurai who very first started to use muskets. So they're a reenactment team, and they have a flag and a seal and everything. And Ubisoft just decided to steal all of it, just completely rip off the design and add it to a bunch of merchandise that they're selling along with like a early release of Assassin's Creed. They also put it inside of their art book as the original art created for their new game, which I don't know how you get away with that. And this team, this clan that does these reenactments, has written them, asked them politely multiple times, like, hey, could we not be associated with this? Like, we don't want to be part of a game that's historically inaccurate, because we, on the other hand, are an actually historically accurate clan based on historically accurate battles. We don't want to be included in fantasy stuff. And also, we never gave you the right to just use our material, our designs, our flags, our seals. Ubisoft's reply to this is just, you know what, we'll look into it. Sorry, too late. We've already printed all the art books and kind of almost finished up the game, so we're not going to have time to remove it. And what can this group do? Nothing, really. They're battling a giant evil corporation who can afford to hire an international lawyer should they try to fight copyright. And this little clan itself, this little group of reenactors, don't have money to gather together to hire a lawyer who can both speak French and Japanese and translate and fight it in court internationally. That's like an ultra expensive, people always say, why don't you just sue them? You guys should sue them for that. Well, there's no pro bono lawyer fighting overseas for copyright that small. It's not something you can easily afford. You're looking at thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, whereas this is just like a volunteer get together. after work group that does these reenactments and stuff like that. This isn't like a super rich conglomerate like Ubisoft is, who can afford to even fight this should they try to take it to court. So they're just kind of screwed. They're just like, nah, we're going to steal your stuff, and we'll use it however we want. We don't care if you don't want to be associated with our game. So again, like, why the offensive hate? And why does, like, nobody call this out? It's like, it seems like a lot of people will call out racism right away until it happens to the East. And then people are just kind of like, well, it's okay, it's Asia. Those people are always nice about everything that happens, very polite. It's kind of sickening to watch. And one last one here. We're going over to China now, who just released a pretty awesome game, Black Myth Wukong. If you haven't played it, pretty fun. It's similar to a Souls-like game, although it's, I'd say, not quite as hard as a Souls-like game because you don't have to gather everything back from dying like you do in Dark Souls. But, okay, enough about the game. You're not here to listen about that. Anyway, again, we're dealing with attacks, and this is coming from different companies like NeoGAF, Reset Era, IGN. The first thing they complained about, and this is one that kind of like really blew my mind, like how do you complain about this, is that they said Black Myth Wukong was racist because it didn't include a lot of, well, I should say bigoted, because it didn't include women characters, and it didn't include people of color or other races from all over the world. So if you know anything about this and the Monkey King and the whole Black Myth Wukong, first of all the characters are anthropomorphic animals. They're bipedal animals, kind of like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all the enemies they fought. There is no race involved. There's species, I guess. I don't really think it would be a good idea to try and make an animal represent a race either. I think you could get into some hot water trying to do stuff like that, so they're definitely not going to mess with that. And there isn't really any white people or Asian people in the game either. There's kind of like mythical versions of some Chinese, like old school priests and monks, I guess you could, like mythical versions of them. Some are like, they look like they're half daikon radish and half human, but no race is really represented aside from China, right? It's a Chinese myth that was started so long ago, probably the people who wrote it had never left China or ever seen other races. So it would have probably been pretty difficult for them to include it in a really, really, really old myth, fairy tale, like, it's such a weird gripe against Eastern developers that there's not enough diversity in their Chinese-based Chinese myth about Chinese people in a Chinese area. I don't know how, and on top of it, there's no races at all represented. There's no primary race. You're a monkey in the game, and you fight things like a giant snake person. You fight wolf people. I don't, it's such a weird gripe. I don't understand. It's like they wanted to go after them just to make up something to go after them for. Then there was multiple game journalists from, like the ones I mentioned before, NeoGAF, Reset Era, IGN, who said there was a history of sexism at the company that created Black Myth Wukong. And the devs were, of course, taken aback, like, what are you talking about? Like, we pretty much are on crunch hours 24/7, like most game companies, if you know how it is working at a game company. I've done QA testing before, and I can tell you there's not a lot of downtime. You're working like 24/7, like the hours are insane. I've done some localization too in Japan, and it's the same thing. There's just like non-stop crunch to get that game done. But the way that these articles are written, it's like a bunch of guys hanging out at a bar throwing back sexist comments at that bar, where obviously the company wrote back again, like, can you show any evidence of that? Has there ever been a report from our company that something like that's happened? And again, these companies had to either, number one, they took down the article, or they put up an apology because they couldn't come back with any sources for this. So it's just weird, random attacking. Again, another Eastern developer for being from the East, I guess, having different traditions and culture that is represented in their game. Another one, again, we've got IGN in France, made a whole pun about they think it's ridiculous in the game that your character can shrink down its staff, so you have like a staff you fight with in Black Myth Wukong, and shove it in his ear. And they're like, that's so dumb. He'd like hurt the inside of his head by doing that, or get like an ear infection. And it's like, I get it that that's a joke. Like, I don't think they're trying to be overly offensive, but you gotta realize that's trying to make a joke of like what actually happens in the real story. The guy shrinks down his staff and he stores it in his ear. That's, if anybody's ever read the original, Journey to the West story about the Monkey King, that's where he stores it. So it's like the equivalent of being like, you know what's stupid? Cinderella's coach turns back into a pumpkin. You're like, okay, yeah, that does happen in the story, but I mean, it's a myth, right? It's a fairy tale. I mean, it's literally called Black Myth Wukong. So, fantastical stuff happens. The character does unrealistic things. It's magical. It's whimsical. But I don't understand the joke here. Like, what? Why do you think that's so weird? Or, you want to make fun of it? It's such a weird gripe. Again, like, they're trying to pick out anything they can to be angry at these guys. Another one was that they believe that the game wasn't as popular as it appears to be on Steam. A lot of people wanted to see the game fail. They weren't happy with the fact that it didn't represent women or multiple races, that it only had animal characters in it. Why, I don't know. So when it did come out on Steam, it was a massive seller. It's looking to hit like one of the best-selling games of the year, and there were 2,000 plus positive reviews from America. And they're like, well, I guess that's probably possible that in English there would be 2,000, good reviews, positive reviews that, put the game up higher on the scale as far as ratings go. But they're like, look at this. It's most likely bots from China because there's over 62,000 positive reviews only in Chinese. So definitely they're botting the entire review process. But now look, I know in the past China has been accused of this, but you've got to think about population-wise what we're talking about here. 2,000 positive reviews from America, population 300 million. 62,000 positive reviews from China, population 1 billion. That's not really outrageous as far as like a percentage is concerned if you think about the population of those two countries. So shooting for that whole idea, like I'd get it if it was like millions and millions and millions of positive reviews that all look the same. But first of all, the person saying they think this is bots couldn't read Chinese. They're just assuming these are botted comments. And when something's botted on like Twitter or pretty much anything that's on the internet. It just doesn't sound human, right? But if you can't even read it, how can you accuse it of that? It's just such a malicious, ridiculous attempt to shoot down something I guess they just don't agree with. So that's where we're at with the last 3 Asian-based games that I touched, as far as games from the East are concerned, although I don't think I'd call Assassin's Creed from the East, obviously, since it's made by Ubisoft. But what is the thing that's going on recently where so many Eastern developers are being attacked simply for making the game that they want to make? I don't get it. I don't understand. The other thing was when FromSoft came out with Elden Ring. How much did they get attacked because of their UI? They have little to no UI. If you don't know what UI is, that's the user interface, everything you can see on the screen to touch and tap and everything like that. Companies attack them because you start the game and you just kind of have to figure out where to go, what to do, what you want to quest on, what enemy you want to attack, and stuff like that. And a lot of Western developers attack the game. They're like, this game's so stupid, I can't even get through it. Well, first of all, it's supposed to be a challenging game. It's supposed to make you have to pretty much level up your skills in real life to beat it. So that first complaint is kind of like, have you ever played a game from FromSoft? And the second all is the UI being all over the screen where it's like, go here, follow these footprints. You can use your Elden Ring senses to smell a clue over this way. Follow this key on the map. Follow this compass. That's just the way, they've never worked that way. This is the first time even one of their games had a map, let alone a bunch of stuff on the screen. And the reason they do that is their style of play is that they want you to be immersed in the game. You're looking at the character on the screen. You're not constantly monitoring your Elden senses or following footprints on the ground. You've got like a life bar, a stamina bar, and a magic bar, and that's it. That's all you got. That's just the way their games have always been, and why they should suddenly change it for something the West wants. So, sorry. I still have a horrible cough. The fact that they want them to change it for something the West wants is another like attack on, an Asian dev company simply doing the way they always done it with their style, their tradition, and their culture. It's so weird that they want to force these Western changes on these Eastern developers or make them see a Western way, yet still say they're open-minded, they're not racist. They want to see more diversity in the community, but unless you're Asian, then they'll attack you. I don't get it. And it's like, look, I think what's happening here is recently there's been a lot of bombs in the West as far as look at Sony with Concord, that game just bombed out. Ubisoft only sold something like 100 pre-orders for Assassin's Creed, which is super bad. And plus, you should never pre-order anything, so I'm glad to hear that. Their newest Star Wars game is bombing out. It's not doing great. And look, I'm not looking for these games to fail. What I'm surprised by is the fact that they're not thinking about how could they copy these Eastern developers that are doing so well in the market and instead just attack them. Why do this? Why not praise them for the things they've figured out about the market, for the things they've figured out about game development, and maybe, I know this sounds crazy, try to copy the fact that they're doing things like not adding a bunch of extra sales in the game, not making you have to do this constant buy a battle pass, buy all these items for the character after you've already bought the game. A lot of these games aren't doing that. And I guess it's really pissing off game developers in the West, so instead of just trying to mimic what sells better, does better, markets better, they'll just attack the creators, which is just sad and pathetic. Anyway, sorry about the long rant. I'd love to hear your feedback on this, your own opinion. It's just sad to see because I'm seeing so much great creativity come out of the East. I'm seeing a lot of Eastern games do really well. I'm loving fresh new ideas that are coming out of places like Korea, Japan, and China. And it's sad to see these things attacked instead of praised for just the fresh new art, ideas, concepts, and cultural connections, such as, we get to see a very famous tale from China that's even celebrated in Japan as well. They love the whole, Monkey King and aesthetic of it and everything like that. To see these things attacked simply for being part of the culture, part of the tradition. Anyway, guys, I'm going to sign off here. To my members, thank you so much. For those of you who viewed, also thank you. Those who subscribe, double thank you. A like, a comment, anything helps. And for those of you who've been waiting for Osoroshi to make a return, I'm working on the channel right now. I'm halfway through one episode. It's looking like I'm going to try to get 2 to 3 done and start to release them. I'm thinking probably at the beginning of October. I'm going to have a couple done ahead of time. I'm not going to release all of them at once, but I want to get a couple done ahead of time so that I'm not bogged down. These take way longer to do than the videos I do here on Unrested. There's a lot of editing involved, a lot of research involved, a lot of making an actual script, a lot of editing a ton of video and stuff and footage from things I'm talking about. Just to give you a slight sneak peek, I'll let you know the very first video that comes out is based on finding everyday horror in Japan. And yes, I am making a separate channel for Osoroshi. It's just going to be called Osoroshi. And that's mostly because the people who come here are here for, Japan's frequently asked questions, for things going on, tradition, culture, topics, politics, etc. going on in Japan. They're not here usually for a lot of horror stuff. So I don't want to freak anyone out by putting those videos here. They tend to do either somewhat okay or horrible because it's like a sudden shock to the normal community I have here, which I totally get. I respect. I love all the viewers I have. Very happy for it. My channel continues to gain subscribers, which
blows my mind. I gained another 100 just this last week, which I'm shocked. And my views are on a steady incline too. It's nuts. So thank you guys. Until next time, let me hear your comments below. Let's start a happy but polite dialogue. Let's all be civil. I know some of these topics can get people in a bit of a tiff, so let's try to keep it civil below, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Have a great rest of the day.